The Milky Way had never seen such prosperity. 300 years after humanity's first faster-than-light jump, the galaxy boasted a thriving coalition of 17 sentient species. The Galactic Accord, headquartered on the artificial ring world Celestia, governed trade routes spanning thousands of light years. Humanity, once the newcomers, had earned respect through their adaptability and innovative spirit. Admiral Jack Thompson gazed through the viewport of the gas Prometheus at the swirling colors of the Horsehead Nebula, his weathered face reflected in the transparent steel as he contemplated the upcoming Centennial Galactic Summit. As Earth's representative, he carried the weight of humanity's future on his shoulders. "Admiral, incoming transmission from Director Miller," announced Lieutenant Davis from her console. Thompson straightened his uniform. "Put her through." Director Emma Miller's hologram materialized. Her usually composed features were tense. "Jack, we have a situation." The long-range sensors at Outpost Epsilon detected something disturbing. Thompson's stomach tightened. "Define disturbing, Emma." "The stars at the galactic edge are disappearing." Thompson blinked. "Stars don't just disappear. These are, one by one, in a sequential pattern. Whatever it is, it's headed inward, toward populated systems. Natural phenomenon. Nothing natural moves with such precision." Miller's hologram flickered. "The Arxians' quantum calculations suggest we're looking at an engineered event, something consuming stellar energy on an unprecedented scale." Thompson's mind raced. The Arxians were the oldest species in the Accord, with mathematical abilities far beyond humans. If they were concerned, how long do we have? At current progression, 3 months before it reaches the outer colonies, 6 until it threatens Earth. Thompson's jaw tightened. "And the summit starts tomorrow." "Exactly. Every species needs to know, but carefully. Panic would be catastrophic." Thompson nodded, already formulating a plan. "I'll address the council personally. Meanwhile, assemble our best scientists at Ganymede Station. We need options." As Miller's hologram vanished, Thompson turned back to the viewport. Out there, beyond the visible stars, something was coming. Something that threatened everything the Accord had built. "Lieutenant, set course for Celestia. Maximum speed." As the Prometheus's engines hummed to life, Thompson couldn't shake the feeling that the galaxy was sliding toward an abyss. Humanity had faced extinction before. The climate wars, the Mars rebellion, the Proxima incident. But this was different. This threat didn't discriminate. It would consume everything in its path. The fate of not just humanity, but all sentient life, would depend on what happened in the coming days. Thompson only hoped that the ingenuity that had carried humans to the stars would be enough to save them now. The Centennial Galactic Summit descended into chaos within minutes of Admiral Thompson's presentation. "Preposterous," bellowed Ambassador Grohl of the Taurian Confederation, his massive fists pounding the marble table. "Stars do not simply vanish." The holographic display floating above the central podium showed the time-lapse footage. 27 stars winking out over 6 weeks, each disappearance followed by a pulse of gamma radiation that quickly faded. "The evidence is irrefutable," countered Elder Ties of the Arxians, her crystalline form refracting light across the chamber. "Our calculations indicate a 99.87% probability of an artificial cause." Thompson stepped forward. "We're calling it the Void Front. It's advancing at approximately half a light year per Earth week and accelerating." The chamber erupted again, delegates from 17 species shouting over one another. President Rise of the United Earth Government raised her hand for silence. "Instead of arguing about its existence, we should be discussing solutions," she said firmly. "Director Miller, what options has the Science Council identified?" Miller's hologram appeared beside Thompson. "We've ruled out conventional weapons. Whatever this is, it exists partially outside our dimension. However, we've identified the signature of a quantum-level consciousness guiding the phenomenon." "An intelligence?" Ambassador Krell of the insectoid Vesperi clicked his mandibles nervously. You suggest we can communicate with it. Perhaps, Miller replied. But its actions indicate it may not be interested in dialogue. It's harvesting stellar energy at an unprecedented scale. Professor Alan West, Earth's leading physicist, stepped forward. His rumpled appearance contrasted sharply with the formal attire of the delegates. The void front operates by inverting space-time, essentially folding stars into pocket dimensions where their energy can be extracted with perfect efficiency. If unchecked, Thompson added grimly, our models predict complete galactic extinction within 2 years. The silence that followed was deafening. Then Ambassador Xora of the Aquatic Melusians spoke, her translator converting her harmonic speech. The ancient archives on Melusia Prime speak of a similar event 8 million years ago. Our ancestors called it the Great Devouring. All eyes turned to her. There are no details of how it was stopped, only that it was. The archives mention a species called the Precursors who sacrificed themselves to save the galaxy. The Precursors are mythological, scoffed Grohl. Perhaps not. Elder Tiz interjected. Our oldest records reference an advanced civilization that vanished suddenly. We always assumed they destroyed themselves. Thompson exchanged glances with Miller. We need to find those archives. President Reyes nodded. While we investigate the Melusian archives, we must prepare evacuation protocols for threatened systems, and we need a backup plan if we can't stop this thing. As the summit shifted to emergency response planning, Professor West pulled Thompson aside. Admiral, there's something else. My team has detected quantum fluctuations preceding each stellar collapse. I think the void front is searching for something. Searching? For what? West's eyes were troubled. I don't know, but it's not just consuming stars randomly. It's following a pattern, like it's hunting. Thompson felt a chill. And if it finds what it's looking for, then God help us all. It's not working. Dr. Leigh Barnes shouted over the alarms blaring throughout Ganymede Station. The experimental quantum disruptor designed to unravel the void front had catastrophically failed. Through the reinforced viewport, they watched as the unmanned test platform disintegrated into sparkling dust. 3 weeks had passed since the summit. 3 more stars had vanished. The evacuation of the outer colonies was underway, but panic was spreading faster than ships could move people. Professor West ran shaking hands through his gray hair. The mathematics was perfect. It should have worked. Mathematics isn't enough, said a quiet voice from the doorway. Captain Marcus Reed, formerly of the deep space exploration vessel Odyssey, leaned against the frame. His weathered face bore the distinctive radiation scarring of someone who'd spent too much time near black holes. Thompson turned. Reed, what are you doing here? Director Miller called me in. Said you needed someone who thinks differently. Reed straightened and walked to the central holotable. May I? West nodded, and Reed manipulated the controls, bringing up the pattern of stellar disappearances. You're all approaching this wrong, Reed said. You're treating the void front as a weapon to be countered or a natural phenomenon to be diverted. It's neither. He zoomed in on the energy readings. It's a harvester. And what do all harvesters have in common? Dr. Barnes frowned. They collect resources. No. Reed smiled thinly. They're inefficient. They waste. Look here. He highlighted energy dispersal patterns following each stellar collapse. Nearly 30% of the energy is being lost during transfer. That's their weakness. Thompson leaned forward. Explain. I spent 3 years studying the plasma storms in the Cygnus X1 accretion disk. Energy behaves predictably even in extreme conditions. If you trigger a resonance cascade at precisely the right frequency, you can amplify those inefficiencies. West's eyes widened. You're suggesting we force the void front to choke on its own meal. Essentially. Reed nodded. We can't stop it from consuming stars, but we can make each star indigestible, like dropping soap in a complex machine. It ruins the works. Dr. Barnes was already running calculations. It could work. We'd need to modify a star's quantum signature before the front reaches it. But how? Reed pulled out an old-fashioned data stick. I've been developing a theoretical framework for stellar engineering. Never thought I'd use it like this. Thompson studied the man. Why haven't you published this? Reed's expression darkened. Some knowledge is dangerous in the wrong hands. But right now, we need every dangerous idea we've got. Over the next 72 hours, Reed worked with Barnes and West to develop what they called Project Indigestion. They selected Wolf 359, a red dwarf directly in the void front's path, as their test subject. The modified stellar probe, carrying Reed's quantum resonator, plunged into Wolf 359's churning surface. For hours, nothing happened. Then, as the void front approached, the star began to pulse with an unusual rhythm. When the front engulfed Wolf 359, instead of the star simply vanishing, a massive explosion of energy erupted. The monitoring stations recorded the void front recoiling, its pattern disrupted. "It worked," Barnes exclaimed. "The front is retreating from that sector." Reed's expression remained grave. "Temporarily. We've wounded it, but also angered it, and now it knows we can fight back." Thompson studied the readings. "How quickly can we deploy this to other stars?" "That's the problem," Reed said. "Each resonator must be calibrated to its specific star. We need time." "Time we don't have," Thompson replied, pointing to new data streaming in. "The front has changed course. It's accelerating toward populated systems." Reed's eyes narrowed. "It's not just harvesting anymore. Now it's hunting." Thompson looked at the assembled scientists. "Then we need to give it something worth hunting. Something so tempting it can't resist." "What did you have in mind?" West asked. Thompson's expression hardened with determination. "The biggest trap in human history. This is either the most brilliant plan in history or the most insane," Director Miller remarked as she observed the massive construction project from the Prometheus's bridge. Orbiting the binary star system of Alpha Centauri, thousands of ships from all 17 species worked in harmony, assembling the largest structure ever built by sentient beings. The honeypot. Captain Reed, now officially reinstated to oversee the project, stood beside Thompson at the viewport. "A little of both, probably. That's humanity's specialty." The honeypot was deceptively simple in concept. A massive quantum amplifier that would make Alpha Centauri appear to the void front as the most energy-rich target in the galaxy. An irresistible feast. When the front attempted to consume it, the modified stars would trigger a chain reaction, forcing the entity into a quantum loop. "Status report," Thompson asked. Professor West's voice came over the comm. "Final calibrations complete. The binary stars are synchronized. When the front arrives, both will collapse simultaneously, creating the quantum deadlock." Thompson nodded. "And evacuation status?" "Complete," Miller replied. "No sentient life within 3 light-years of the target zone." Reed's calculations had predicted the void front would reach Alpha Centauri in approximately 6 hours. The entire Galactic Accord fleet had assembled at a safe distance to observe, and, if necessary, attempt a desperate last stand. 5 hours and 30 minutes later, the first tendrils of the void front appeared at the edge of the system. Distortions in space-time that bent light around them, creating a shimmering effect against the backdrop of stars. "It's beautiful, in a terrifying way," Reed murmured. Thompson watched as the front approached the binary stars. Any moment now. The front paused, as if sensing the trap. For several tense minutes, it hovered at the system's edge. "It's not taking the bait," Miller whispered. Reed's expression hardened. "It's learning. Adapting." Suddenly, instead of engulfing the stars, the front began to coalesce into a more defined shape, something almost resembling a massive translucent jellyfish composed of dark energy and quantum distortions. "It's communicating." West's voice was incredulous as patterns of energy rippled across the entity's surface. Thompson turned to the xenolinguistics specialist they'd brought aboard. "Dr. Rivera, can you make anything of this?" Dr. Rivera's fingers flew across her console. "It's not language as we understand it, but there's definitely pattern and intent. I think it's asking why." "Why what?" Thompson demanded. "Why we're fighting. Why we resist." Rivera looked up, her eyes wide. "It doesn't understand." Reed stepped forward. "Open a quantum channel. Use the honeypot's amplifiers to boost our signal." "What are you doing?" Miller asked. "Negotiating," Reed replied simply. "If it can ask questions, it can understand answers." Using the honeypot's massive communication array, Reed transmitted a simple message encoded in mathematical principles that transcended language. "We live here. These stars sustain us. Take them, and we die." For long moments, nothing happened. Then, the entity rippled again, more intensely. "It's responding," Rivera reported. "The pattern suggests confusion. No, realization. I think it didn't know the stars supported life. It didn't realize it was committing genocide." Reed translated. Thompson watched as the front continued to communicate, its patterns growing more complex. "Is it apologizing?" "Not exactly," Rivera said. "It's explaining. From what I can interpret, it's some kind of interdimensional being that feeds on stellar energy. It's been traveling between galaxies for billions of years." "Ask it why our stars," Miller suggested. "There are billions of uninhabited systems it could feed on." Reed transmitted the question. The response came quickly. Rivera's eyes widened. "It says our stars taste better. They have a flavor. Something about our region of space creates stars with unique quantum properties it finds appealing. So we're dealing with a cosmic gourmand." Thompson couldn't help but laugh at the absurdity. Reed was already formulating a new message. "Then let's offer it an alternative menu." The Great Compromise, as it came to be known, was celebrated across the galaxy as the most significant diplomatic achievement in known history. 3 months after the standoff at Alpha Centauri, representatives from all 17 species gathered on Celestia to formalize the agreement with the entity they now called the Nomad. Admiral Thompson stood proudly as President Reyes signed the accord, which established designated feeding zones for the Nomad, uninhabited star systems specifically selected for their remoteness and lack of potential for supporting life. In return, the Nomad shared knowledge that revolutionized understanding of quantum physics and interdimensional travel. Captain Reed and Professor West had already begun integrating this knowledge into new technologies that promised to transform society. "I still can't believe we negotiated with a cosmic entity that eats stars," Thompson remarked to Miller as they watched the ceremony. Miller smiled. "That's what makes humans special in this galaxy. Any other species would have kept fighting until they were destroyed or ran away. We thought to ask why. And offered dinner alternatives," Thompson added with a chuckle. The most remarkable discovery had come during the communication process itself. The Nomad was not unique. It was one of many such entities that traversed the multiverse in search of stellar energy. Some were ancient beyond comprehension, having witnessed the birth and death of countless universes. "Ambassador Thompson." A young aide approached, interrupting his thoughts. "The Arxian delegation requests your presence." Thompson, newly appointed as humanity's ambassador to interdimensional relations, followed the aide to where Elder Tiz waited with her entourage. "The calculation is complete," Tiz announced without preamble, her crystalline form vibrating with excitement. "Using the Nomad's equations, we've confirmed the existence of at least 7 parallel galaxies accessible through controlled quantum gateways. 7 new frontiers," Thompson mused. "Our exploration has barely begun." Indeed. But more importantly, we've established that these entities can be reasoned with. Communication is possible across dimensional barriers that we once thought impenetrable. The implications were staggering. The galaxy had faced extinction and emerged not just intact but enlightened, with new allies and new horizons. Later that evening, Thompson found Reed alone on an observation deck, staring out at the stars. Having second thoughts about coming out of retirement, Thompson asked. Reed shook his head, just contemplating the view. Those stars look different to me now. How so? Before, they were just navigation points or scientific curiosities. Now, Reed gestured at the glittering expanse. Now I see them as living energy, food for beings we can barely comprehend, homes for civilizations we haven't met yet, and bridges to dimensions we're only beginning to understand. Thompson nodded. The Nomad has agreed to teach us about stellar engineering. Imagine being able to extend a star's lifespan, or safely harvest its energy without destroying it. That's the real victory here, Reed said quietly. Not that we saved ourselves, but that we found a way forward that benefits everyone, even a star-eating interdimensional entity. As they spoke, a gentle ripple appeared in space near Celestia, the now familiar signature of the Nomad making its presence known. It had taken to observing Accord meetings, learning about the species it had nearly eradicated. You know, Thompson said, watching the ethereal display. For thousands of years, humans feared what might come from the stars. Invaders, conquerors, destroyers. We never imagined our first truly alien encounter would be with something so completely beyond our comprehension that the concept of conquest was meaningless to it. Reed smiled. And we never imagined we'd end up inviting it to dinner. The legacy of the crisis, as historians would later write, wasn't just survival. It was the beginning of humanity's true place in the cosmos, not as conquerors or victims, but as mediators, innovators, and bridge builders between realities. The stars continued to shine, now with newfound purpose and protection. And humanity, having outsmarted the universe once more, turned its ingenuity toward the greatest adventure yet, peaceful coexistence with the unknown. 5 years after the compromise, humanity stood at the threshold of a new era. The Ganymede Research Station, once a hastily assembled crisis center, had expanded into the Interdimensional Studies Complex, the most advanced scientific facility in known space. Dr. Leigh Barnes, now Director of Quantum Applications, led Thompson through the gleaming central laboratory, where scientists from a dozen species worked in harmony. The Nomad wasn't the only one who learned from our encounter, she explained, gesturing toward a shimmering portal at the lab center. This is our third successful quantum gateway. Thompson observed the portal with measured awe. Where does this one lead? A parallel dimension where stars emit gravitational waves rather than electromagnetic radiation. The physics there are fascinating. The incorporation of the Nomad's knowledge had accelerated technological development across the Accord by centuries. Interstellar travel, once requiring days or weeks, could now be accomplished in hours through controlled quantum folding, a safe adaptation of the very technique the Nomad used to consume stars. Professor West joined them, his once gray hair now completely white, but his eyes bright with excitement. Ambassador Thompson, perfect timing. We're about to test the Stellar Rejuvenation Probe. On a massive view screen, they watched as an unmanned vessel approached a dying red dwarf at the edge of Archean space. The star, having nearly exhausted its hydrogen, had been designated for natural collapse before the Nomad's arrival. Now, it served as the perfect test subject. The probe carries a quantum catalyst derived from the Nomad's feeding mechanism, West explained. But instead of extracting energy, it stimulates fusion of heavier elements, essentially giving the star a new fuel source. As they watched, the probe released its payload into the star's churning surface. For several minutes, nothing visible happened. Then, gradually, the star's corona brightened, its color shifting from dull red toward a warmer orange. It's working, Barnes whispered. Stellar life extension is now a reality. Thompson felt a familiar presence and turned to find Captain Reed, now Admiral Reed of the Interdimensional Exploration Fleet, standing behind them. Impressive, Reed nodded. But perhaps more interesting is what's happening back on Earth. The aftermath of the crisis had transformed human society in unexpected ways. The near-extinction experience had united Earth's nations and colonies in common purpose. Old conflicts seemed petty in the face of cosmic forces that could erase civilizations without malice or even awareness. The Lunar Accords were ratified yesterday, Reed continued. For the first time in human history, we have a unified planetary government with actual authority. About time, Thompson remarked. Only took an interdimensional crisis and the discovery of 17 alien civilizations to get us working together. Reed smiled wryly. Human stubbornness at its finest. We needed a galactic perspective to solve our local problems. Their conversation was interrupted by an alert from Barnes' console. We're receiving a transmission from the Nomad network. After establishing peaceful relations, the Accord had constructed specialized communication relays that could transmit and receive the Nomad's quantum signals. These relays had eventually expanded into what became known as the Nomad network, a communication system that spanned dimensions. Barnes activated the central holodisplay. What appeared wasn't the Nomad they had come to know, but a different entity altogether, its quantum patterns similar but distinct, like a different dialect of the same language. Another Nomad? Thompson asked, stunned. West was already analyzing the signal. Similar composition, but different quantum signature. I believe this is what our Nomad would call a. The translation is imprecise. Kindred traveler. Barnes worked frantically at her console. It's requesting contact with the star speakers. That's us, humanity specifically. It says the one we call Nomad has shared knowledge of our compromise. Reed's expression grew serious. Are we looking at a potential invasion? More Star Eaters learning we have good food? I don't think so, West replied, studying the patterns. The communication carries markers of curiosity, not hunger. I believe it wants to learn. Thompson considered this development. So now we're becoming known among interdimensional entities as the species that communicates. The cosmic diplomats. Precisely, Barnes nodded. The Nomad might have spread the word that there are beings here worth talking to, not just stars worth eating. Reed gazed thoughtfully at the shimmering representation of the new entity. I always wondered why the Nomad was traveling alone. Perhaps they're not usually solitary creatures. Or perhaps, Thompson suggested, our compromise created a new possibility even they hadn't considered, coexistence rather than consumption. As they prepared to establish formal communication with this new visitor, Thompson reflected on humanity's journey. From fearful creatures huddled on a single planet to mediators between cosmic forces and multiple dimensions, all because humans had done what they did best: find unexpected solutions to impossible problems. The universe, it seemed, was full of entities with godlike power but limited perspectives. Perhaps humanity's greatest contribution wouldn't be technological innovation, but something far more precious: the ability to see possibilities others missed, to connect the disconnected, and to find common ground across the greatest of divides. Humanity had not just outsmarted the universe, they had helped it grow wiser. 100 years after the Void Crisis, the Milky Way had become unrecognizable to those who had witnessed the first contact with the Nomad. What had begun as 17 separate civilizations, united by necessity, had evolved into the Interdimensional Coalition, a thriving network of over 50 species spanning 3 galaxies and 7 dimensional planes. On the 100th anniversary of the Great Compromise, representatives gathered at the Nexus, a massive space station constructed at the exact coordinates where humanity had first communicated with the Nomad. At the center of the Nexus's grand chamber floated holographic representations of those who had made that historic first contact. Thompson, Reed, West, Barnes, and Miller, names now as legendary as Armstrong or Einstein, had been to earlier generations. Amelia Thompson, great-granddaughter of the former admiral and now chancellor of the Quantum Academy, addressed the assembled delegates. A century ago, faced with extinction, humanity did something unexpected, she began. Instead of fighting or fleeing, we chose understanding. We asked why when others would have only asked how to stop it. That question, That simple human curiosity saved not just our civilization but opened doorways to realities we had never imagined possible. The nomad, who had become known as the Elder, hovered nearby, its quantum pattern now familiar to children throughout the coalition. Alongside it floated 13 other interdimensional entities, the Conclave, as they called themselves, cosmic travelers who had once fed indiscriminately on stars throughout the multiverse, but now harvested only from designated systems through methods that preserved stellar longevity. The knowledge exchange had transformed both biological and interdimensional civilizations. Humans and their allies had gained understanding of quantum mechanics and dimensional engineering that would have taken millennia to develop independently. The Conclave had gained perspective on the value of biological life and the concept of sustainable consumption, ideas entirely foreign to beings who had existed in solitude for billions of years. Our greatest strength was never our technology, Chancellor Thompson continued. It was our adaptability, our willingness to see solutions where others saw only threats. When faced with beings who consumed stars, we didn't just see destroyers. We recognized hungry travelers who didn't understand the consequences of their actions. She gestured toward the newest addition to the coalition, representatives from the Andromeda Galaxy, who had established contact just 5 years earlier after detecting the quantum signatures of the Nomad network. This legacy of ingenuity, of finding the third option when presented with fight or flight, continues to define humanity's role in the cosmos. We are bridge builders between realities, translators between consciousnesses that would otherwise never comprehend each other. The technological advancements had been extraordinary. Stars on the verge of collapse could now be rejuvenated through quantum catalysis. Travel between galaxies, once thought impossible within a human lifetime, could be accomplished in days through dimensional folding. Energy, once the primary limitation on civilization's growth, was now abundant through controlled quantum harvesting techniques adapted from the Conclave's feeding methods. Yet the most profound changes had been philosophical. Contact with the Conclave had forced humanity to reconsider fundamental concepts of life, intelligence, and moral worth. Beings that existed primarily as patterns of quantum energy challenged traditional definitions of consciousness. Entities that operated across 11 dimensions simultaneously required new frameworks of ethics and communication. After the ceremony, Chancellor Thompson joined her colleague, Director Reed, descendant of the famous captain, on the observation deck overlooking the galactic core. "Do you think they would be proud?" Reed asked, gesturing toward the holographs of their ancestors, "of what we've built?" Thompson smiled. "I think they'd be amazed, but not surprised. They always believed human ingenuity could overcome any obstacle. Even now, some say we were lucky," Reed mused. "That meeting the Nomad was a fortunate accident." "Luck favors the prepared mind," Thompson quoted. "We were ready to ask questions when others would have only fired weapons." Below them, Earth glowed blue and green in the holographic display, still humanity's ancestral home, though now just one of hundreds of human-inhabited worlds. The planet had healed from the environmental damage of earlier centuries, its population stabilized and its ecosystems thriving. The ancient philosophers used to debate whether humanity was alone in the universe, Reed said. How limited their imagination was. "Not only are we not alone in this universe, but we're connected to countless others." Thompson nodded thoughtfully. "And yet, in all these dimensions, across all these realities, human ingenuity remains unique. Not because we're the strongest or the smartest, but because we're the most willing to try the impossible." As they spoke, a subtle alert chimed. A new quantum signature at the edge of detection, unlike any previously catalogued. "Another visitor," Reed remarked, "from even further away." Thompson smiled. "Then we'll do what humans have always done best." "And what's that?" "Welcome them, learn from them, teach them what we know, and find a way to turn potential conflict into mutual benefit." Thompson gazed out at the stars. "After all, outsmarting the universe isn't something you do once. It's something you do every day, with every new challenge." The alert chimed again, stronger this time. Another impossible problem approaching. Another opportunity for human ingenuity to shine. The adventure continued.